Welcome to Too Real for TV podcast, season 1, episode 6. Today we're really diving deep into something incredibly sensitive. It's complex. We're looking at that intersection of chronic illness and marriage breakdown. Just try and picture the scenario. It's harrowing. Someone you know, maybe a close friend, gets a life-altering diagnosis, a moment that demands support, solidarity, everything. But then before they can even really absorb the news, their spouse, the person who made those vows, in sickness and in health, drops a bombshell. They want a divorce. That emotional shockwave, the betrayal, the fear, it's almost impossible to truly grasp unless you've been there. Our main source today is actually a very raw, very immediate online post from someone watching their friend go through this exact thing. And we're pairing that with insights from psychology experts, research on the mental health side of divorce, and some really practical guidance on how to actually support someone in this kind of crisis. It's a core part of what we explore here on Too Real for TV.
It really forces us to look at some uncomfortable truths, doesn't it? And what's really fascinating here, I think, is that the immediate reaction, that gut feeling, is almost always shock and, judgment towards the spouse who leaves. But when you dig a bit deeper, it gets complicated. There are layers for everyone involved. It's not just about the emotional abandonment, though that's huge. It touches on deep psychological stuff, financial realities, and really our whole society's ideas about partnership, about caregiving, about what we owe each other, and ultimately personal well-being too. So today, we're aiming to kind of peel back those layers, look beyond the immediate pain, understand the long-term picture, and hopefully find some real pathways to understanding and support.
Exactly. That's our mission for this deep dive on Too Real for TV. We want to unpack these really tough questions about commitment, about the hidden burden of caregiving, and, that tricky balance of looking after yourself when a marriage hits that ultimate test in sickness and in health. And you might be surprised by some of the statistics, some of the facts we uncover. We really hope we can offer some, practical advice, whether you're going through something like this or maybe trying to help a friend who is. Before we jump right in, just a reminder to like, subscribe, or follow Too Real for TV wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, Audible, Apple Podcasts, basically everywhere. You really don't want to miss our future deep dives on these topics that are, just too real for TV. Okay, so let's start with the immediate impact. That online post that kicked this whole thing off, it's genuinely heart-wrenching, and it clearly struck a nerve. It got huge traction online very quickly. You could see the sort of collective grappling with the emotional weight of it all. The person who wrote it, the friend, she's very upfront. She says she's writing this through tears, that she can't stop shaking. You really feel that raw anger, that helplessness just pouring through the words as she talks about her friend's situation.
That reaction from the friend, the original poster, it's so telling, isn't it? It's not just her own pain. It shows the seismic emotional fallout when something this sudden and unexpected happens. It really highlights how these crises ripple outwards. It affects the whole circle, the village, as they call it later.
Yeah.
It's a shared trauma in a way.
And the scenario itself, it's just brutal in its simplicity. Her best friend, 34 years old, she describes her as bright, funny, selfless, a mom to two really young kids, 3 and 6 years old. She gets diagnosed with breast cancer, which, that alone is earth-shattering news. But before she can even start to process it, before, as the post says, her body hadn't caught up with the pain yet, her husband sits her down. And he just tells her, I can't handle this. Says he wants a divorce, just like that.
It's more than just a personal tragedy, isn't it? It really puts a spotlight on how relationships today can buckle under that kind of unexpected, immense pressure from chronic illness. It makes you question if those vows in sickness and in health are becoming more like, aspirations rather than solid commitments. And what does that mean for us? What's really striking, and mentalhealth.com talks about this, is how that immediate abandonment hits this primal nerve. It's injustice, it's fear, not just for her, but for our whole idea of partnership. They point out that these sudden separations are especially devastating. Why? Because they just bypass all the usual breakdown stuff that happens over time, the slow erosion of trust. This kind of abrupt announcement or finding out about a secret betrayal just dials the shock up to 11. There's absolutely no time to prepare emotionally, no chance to sort of adjust. Your body and mind react like it's a major trauma disbelief, intense anxiety, even physical stuff like your heart racing, feeling exhausted. It's a total system shock.
It sounds like complete dissociation, doesn't it? That description of her friend's reaction, just numb. She didn't even cry when she told me. She just stared, like her body hadn't caught up with the pain yet. Oh, that imagery is just so powerful. It speaks to a level of shock where everything just shuts down. And then the summary of it all: cancer, 2 little kids, no partner, no plan, just fear. And heartbreak. Mm. That betrayal of the vow, in sickness and in health, it feels so absolute here. It's not just breaking a promise, it's like pulling the entire safety net out from under someone right when they need it most.
Exactly. And the psychological hit goes way beyond that initial shock. The person going through it, their mind just keeps replaying things, right?
Hmm.
Conversations, moments, trying to figure out what went wrong, find some reason. This repetitive loop, it's called rumination, and it's actually really damaging. It's different from just processing things because it's circular, it doesn't lead anywhere. You get stuck in the problem, not finding solutions, and that just makes the anxiety, the depression worse. It drains your mental energy, stops you from moving forward emotionally, makes it harder to focus on healing physically or mentally. It really saps your coping ability just when you need every ounce of it.
Okay, so let's try and connect the dots here. We have these raw, powerful reactions from the online community, this specific awful story. How do we layer that with what the experts, the psychologists, the researchers are saying? We need to get a more structured understanding, right? Find some potential solutions. That's what we're trying to do here on Too Real for TV. Help you make sense of these really tough things.
That's a really important step because those immediate emotional responses, they're totally valid, totally understandable, but they often lack that broader context, They don't always have the expert view needed to really grasp the full picture and figure out how to respond constructively. By bringing in what the professionals say, we can hopefully get a perspective that's more compassionate, better informed, and ultimately more practical, something that moves beyond just the initial anger.
Right. So first up, there's this article from Psychology Today, deciding to divorce a spouse with a chronic illness.
Hmm.
And it offers a very different angle, maybe even an uncomfortable one compared to that initial online outrage. It starts with the story about a woman, Ida. She divorced her husband after he got diagnosed with MS, multiple sclerosis. And initially, the therapist, and probably most of us listening, would have that knee-jerk reaction. She abandoned him, broke her vows. Oh. But the article really challenges that. It suggests Ida knew her own limits, knew she wouldn't be able to provide the level of care he'd eventually need as the disease got worse. And it puts forward this idea, maybe counterintuitive, that divorcing him early actually allowed him the chance to find someone who could love him and provide that care. And in the story, he actually did. He met a nurse, they fell in love, and she cared for him for 35 years.
That story, it introduces this really nuanced view, doesn't it? It asks for compassion for both people, even the one initiating the divorce in these awful circumstances. It really underlines that divorcing someone with a chronic illness brings this unique set of challenges. It's rarely just black and white. It shifts the whole narrative away from simple good guy, bad guy thinking towards something much more complex, more about agonizing personal choices. The article lists, I think, 10 key issues to think about. It stresses that divorce is almost always a life crisis, whatever the reason. For the ill spouse, it can trigger panic, anger, despair. But the spouse initiating it, they often grapple with intense guilt, regret, just a whole storm of conflicting feelings. This view forces us to think about the capacity for long-term caregiving and that very real risk of caregiver burnout, which happens way more than we talk about.
That's a really crucial point, isn't it? And it definitely pushes against some deeply ingrained ideas we have. It's not trying to excuse breaking a commitment, but it's acknowledging the sheer, sometimes unbearable weight that chronic illness puts on a relationship, especially on the main caregiver. The article even says that individual needs and happiness are valid points to consider. It suggests if the illness has basically destroyed a healthy relationship dynamic, then divorce may be a reasonable decision if you prioritize your own personal growth, happiness, and fulfillment. That's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people, I think. It directly tackles caregiver burnout, strongly recommending support groups as absolutely essential. And it also emphasizes learning about the illness itself, the prognosis, what's likely coming down the track so you can realistically predict the challenges ahead.
And practically speaking, something often missed, the Psychology Today piece really gets into the financial side too, which can be devastating. Chronic illness means chronic care, which usually means huge financial pressure. Figuring out how medical bills, insurance, disability benefits, splitting assets, how all that gets handled after divorce is absolutely vital. The aim has to be making sure both people have some basic financial stability if possible, preventing total economic ruin. And if there are kids involved, custody gets way more complex. The court might have to look really closely at the ill spouse's ability to care for them now and in the future, which sadly can put even more emotional strain on the kids.
Which brings us right back to that practical advice from the online comments, get a lawyer. The Psychology Today article completely backs this up. It says you need a whole team. Doctors who get the illness, therapists for the emotional side, financial experts, and yes, lawyers who specialize in these complex, sensitive divorces. And this advice is such a stark contrast to that abrupt departure in the original story. It really suggests that exploring all the other options before divorce is crucial, to avoid regret, guilt, extra suffering, things like looking into more treatments, support services, adaptive tech, finding communities, couples counseling, exhausting those possibilities first.
Yes, it's about making sure that if divorce is the outcome, it's handled with as much respect and compassion as possible, and that all the necessary supports, medical, community, are really looked at and ideally put in place for both people. This is critical because, as the article points out, ironically, those community support systems often start to fray or break down during a divorce. So it becomes even more important to actively try and keep those connections going, friends, family, support groups, especially in that tough initial separation period and the first year after.
Okay, now let's shift focus a bit and look at mentalhealth.com's insights on sudden separations in marriages. This source kind of widens the lens beyond just chronic illness. It talks about other triggers for abrupt breakups, finding out about infidelity, hidden addictions, secret financial problems, losing a job, or even just one partner having a sudden drastic change of heart. The cancer diagnosis story we started with fits perfectly into this bigger picture of traumatic life events that just shatter your sense of security.
Yeah, the article really hammers home why these sudden breakups are especially devastating.
Hmm.
Unlike splits that build up over time, where you might have some inkling, some chance to process, these abrupt ones give you zero emotional runway. That's what ramps up the shock factor so intensely. It mentioned that even if maybe there were subtle signs looking back, people often experience this kind of divorce as a sudden trauma. And the symptoms, they sound a lot like PTSD. Deep disbelief, overwhelming anxiety, physical stuff like heart palpitations, exhaustion, digestive upset. It's not just emotional, it's a profound psychological and physiological assault.
The psychological impact you mentioned, that rumination, sounds
Yeah.
awful, just replaying everything over and over.
It is. Deep sadness, confusion, anger, anxiety, loneliness. It's a whole mess of emotions. And that rumination, that obsessive loop of replaying events, conversations, trying to find fault, it just fuels the anxiety and depression.
And the physical side, too. He said chronic stress elevates cortisol.
Exactly. It's not just in your head. That constant stress triggers the release of cortisol, the main stress hormone, and high levels over time. That's bad news. It can suppress your immune system, contribute to inflammation, increase risk for heart problems, digestive issues, mess with your sleep. It's a full mind-body attack.
So what helps? What's the immediate care advice?
Well, mentalhealth.com emphasizes basic self-care, surprisingly simple stuff like just keeping a routine, showering, trying to sleep regularly, maybe short walks, things that ground you, give a tiny bit of normalcy and control when everything else feels chaotic. And then therapy is highlighted as absolutely critical. Different types can help. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, helps challenge those negative thought patterns from rumination. Grief counseling is mentioned, especially for something they call ambiguous loss. That's a really powerful term.
Ambiguous loss? What exactly is that?
It's grieving someone who is still alive but emotionally or relationally gone, like a spouse who leaves or changes drastically because of illness. It's tough because there's no closure, no funeral, no societal script for how to handle that kind of loss.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And then there's mindfulness to manage emotions in the moment and trauma-informed therapy if the separation really triggered PTSD-like symptoms. Therapy becomes this vital space to rebuild your sense of self and learn healthier coping strategies.
And beyond the self-care and therapy, the article gets really practical, especially about kids, which is so relevant to our original story with the young children. It stresses needing honest, clear, age-appropriate communication with them. Ideally, both parents presenting a united front, a plan. And protecting the kids emotionally means setting boundaries, right? Deciding what friends and family are told, using phrases like, our focus now is stability for the kids. It's all about consistency, reassurance, minimizing their exposure to the conflict.
Absolutely. And then there's the immediate legal and financial stuff, which feels overwhelming when you're emotionally reeling. The advice is clear. Talk to a divorce lawyer or mediator early. Understand your rights, your responsibilities, what the future might look like financially. Acting fast can protect your interests, especially if you're feeling vulnerable. And gathering documents, marriage certificate, bank statements, insurance policies is presented as essential. non-negotiable, really, for making informed choices and securing your future, which lines up perfectly with what the Reddit commenters were shouting about. Get legal help, protect yourself financially. It shows that even amidst the emotional storm, these practical steps are crucial for building some kind of stable ground underneath you.
Okay, building on that foundation, let's bring in the research perspective. There's a paper from the International Journal of Indian Psychology, IJP, called Effects of Divorce on Mental Health. This isn't just an opinion piece. It pulls together findings from lots of studies. It gives academic weight to what we intuitively know: divorce has serious mental health consequences. It connects divorce directly to higher rates of depression, anxiety, chronic stress, severe emotional problems, loneliness. The conclusion is pretty stark. Divorcees face more mental health problems than married and never married people. So the act of divorcing itself is a major predictor of psychological distress.
And that journal points to something really powerful, the Holmes and Rahe stress scale. It's a well-known tool that measures stress from life events, and it ranks divorce as the second most stressful thing the person can go through, second only to the death of a spouse.
Wow, second only to death.
Yeah. It just underscores the incredible psychological weight divorce carries. It often leads to this chronic stress that, for some people, can become sort of a permanent state. It's not just feeling sad. It can trigger serious behavioral issues like eating disorders or substance abuse, especially if the divorce involved deep betrayals like cheating or abuse, which just shatter trust completely.
And the IGIP research also talks about different experiences based on gender, right? Which echoes some of what we heard in those online comments, like women often facing a disproportionate economic hit, a lower standard of living, especially if they were out of the workforce raising kids.
Exactly. They often face this huge hurdle trying to get back into work with fewer resources, maybe outdated skills. It's a real crisis for many.
And men. The research suggests they might experience more health decline, unhappiness, issues with custody arrangements, and social isolation.
Yes. While studies focusing just on men's mental health post-divorce have historically been fewer, the evidence clearly shows divorce is tough on both genders' psychological well-being. The ways that distress shows up might just look a bit different.
That's interesting. What about cultural differences? Did the IGIP paper touch on that?
It did, and it's fascinating. It asks why some cultures, maybe places with large Muslim or Hindu populations, have much lower divorce rates than, say, the US or Western Europe, where it can be over 50%. The paper suggests that even if people in those cultures are suffering deeply in their marriage, mental trauma, even physical assault, strong religious beliefs, or intense social pressure might make divorce almost forbidden.
So lower divorce rates don't necessarily mean happier marriages.
Precisely. It can mean more suppressed suffering, potentially leading to more mental illness for people trapped in bad marriages because society doesn't allow an exit. It gives a broader context to our story. Different cultures have different ways of dealing with marital distress, different pressures.
That really does paint a complex picture. It shows low divorce rate doesn't equal happy marriages. It reflects cultural views on endurance, stigma, options. The IIGAP paper also reinforces the negative impact on kids, right? Behavioral problems, emotional issues, even a higher chance of their marriages failing later on.
Yes, it underlines how important both parents ideally are for a healthy upbringing and the potential damage from a fractured family. And it notes single parenting is incredibly stressful, more responsibility, often way fewer financial and social resources.
And it also mentions the social network impact, friends drifting away.
Yeah, that's a big one. Existing ties with mutual friends, relatives often get strained or just awkward, leading to significant social isolation. It makes sense why just staying socially active becomes a huge challenge, especially for women maybe juggling more financial and time pressures after divorce, which just reinforces why building new support systems is so vital. Interestingly, it notes some people might remarry quickly just for that social status and support, but second marriages, sadly, fail even more often than first ones, suggest maybe underlying issues don't just disappear.
Okay, let's pivot to some really concrete how-to advice. There's this article by Tracy Miles, The Do's and Don'ts of Helping a Friend Through Divorce. This feels incredibly relevant to that original post and the community wanting to help the woman in crisis. Tracy Miles went through a really tough divorce herself, so her advice comes from lived experience. It's super clear, empathetic, and actionable what not to do and what actually helps.
That lived experience makes all the difference, doesn't it? Her insights are so valuable because they come straight from that place of pain. She really highlights how Comments that seem well-meaning on the surface can actually cause more hurt when someone's already navigating this emotional minefield. It's about being genuinely supportive, not just saying things you think sound right, but showing compassion through actions that are truly helpful and understanding.
Yes, her don'ts are critical because they're such common mistakes. Like, don't say you're better off without him or her, even if it might be true down the road. Saying it right then just dismisses the real loss and grief they're feeling. It minimizes their pain.
Right. It invalidates their current reality.
And another big one. Don't tell your divorced friend about the photos you saw of their ex on social media, especially if the ex looks happy or has moved on. That's just pouring salt in the wound, isn't it? It doesn't help healing.
Not at all. It's cruel, even if unintentional.
She also warns against comparing their situation to someone else's story. Every divorce is unique, right? It needs individual empathy, not comparisons.
And crucially, she stresses,
Yeah.
don't judge and don't give unsolicited advice, especially if you don't really get it or just feel awkward. She points out that someone divorcing often has their confidence shattered, their self-worth crushed, their trust broken. Judging them just adds humiliation and pushes them further away. She shares this really painful story about her own friends who just disappeared. Because it felt awkward, they didn't know whose side to take. Or worse, one friend's husband wouldn't let her hang out with single people.
Oh, that's awful.
She calls those actions like daggers to an already wounded, bleeding heart. It shows how devastating social rejection is when you're already so vulnerable. It really speaks to how uncomfortable society can be with divorce and illness, leading people to pull away when support is needed most.
And one more really powerful don't from her, connecting to that need for long-term support. Don't just be there until the dust settles. Because, as she says, for someone going through this, the dust might never fully settle, or it could take a very, very long time. You need ongoing, consistent, patient support. Months, maybe years. This links right back to those online calls for a village for the woman in our story. It's not a quick fix, it's a marathon.
Exactly. But then the do's offer really clear positive actions, like do invite and include them in plans, even couples events. Loneliness, isolation, they're huge enemies for someone newly single. Just keeping those invitations coming, even if they say no at first, shows you still care, they still belong. It fights that feeling of being forgotten.
And do something encouraging and unexpected. This isn't about big money gestures. It's small, thoughtful things that show you care. Like sending a simple note, a comforting text, maybe a journal, or framing a nice photo of them with their kids, a reminder they're still a family, just different.
There are even more practical things, right?
Yeah, like offering to mow the lawn, watch the kids so they can have a break, or go to an appointment, bringing over dinner, or just showing up with coffee and listening. These small things can be huge spirit lifters when someone's in a dark place. They show they're loved and supported.
And finally, she says, just listen, even when you grow weary of listening. Someone in this crisis feels overwhelmed, maybe like they're going crazy with all the emotions swirling around. They often don't need advice. They need a patient, non-judgmental ear, someone to just be there. And when you do talk, offer comfort. I know it's hard, but it will be okay. Or, you're a wonderful person, you have strength. She quotes that psalm, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted, but reminds us that friends are needed as the physical hands and feet of that comfort.
It really raises a key question, doesn't it? Why do we, even with good intentions, sometimes default to the don'ts instead of the do's? It shows how important it is to actually learn how to be truly supportive and empathetic.
Absolutely.
If you connect all this Tracy Miles' practical advice, the insights from mentalhealth.com, the IJIP research, it paints this powerful picture of social support being a critical shield, a buffer against the terrible mental health outcomes of divorce and trauma. That village concept isn't just nice, it's essential. It can literally be the difference between someone sinking and finding a way back to resilience. Wow. Okay, so that was a really deep dive, wasn't it? Into this incredibly tough space where chronic illness and abandonment collide, and the absolute critical need for a real, committed support network. We've looked at the raw emotion, the shocking stats, and brought in expert views on how to navigate it both for the person suffering and for those wanting to help. It's clear, isn't it? While that initial story is just heartbreaking, understanding the common issues and knowing how to offer real, practical, lasting support can genuinely change someone's ability to rebuild.
It really does underscore how life's hardest moments often reveal the true nature of our connections, their strength, and sometimes, yeah, their fragility. It's a difficult conversation, but a necessary one, about resilience, healing, and what commitment truly means when faced with the worst.
So maybe we leave you with this thought to chew on. We live in a world where commitment sometimes feels optional, where personal happiness is often put first. So, what does resilience really look like in marriage and friendship when you're hit with life's toughest tests? And maybe more importantly, how does our response as a partner, a friend, just as part of a community? How does that redefine in sickness and in health beyond just the words said at a wedding? Definitely something profound to think about. Thank you so much for joining us for this in-depth analysis here on Too Real for TV. We really hope you'll stick with us for future explorations into these complex topics. And please do remember to like, subscribe, follow Too Real for TV, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Podcast, Audible, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. Until next time, stay curious and keep digging for those nuggets of knowledge.
And please, if you or someone you know is facing challenges like these, remember self-compassion. Your journey is yours. It's valid. And finding strength often means having the courage to ask for help, including professional support. You really don't have to go through it alone.